Hello, everyone. This is Professor Evelin Suij-Ojeda, and today I'm going to be discussing with you how to improve your students' engagement in your online courses. This series has actually two parts. The first is the basics, and this is what we're going to be discussing today. And there will be a second part with more practical ideas. So welcome. This is a workshop sponsored by the LITE Center at Westcliff University. So I'm going to show you first our website. You will find this presentation along with lots of resources and past webinars and recorded presentations that you can use in case you have any doubts concerning how to teach online or strategies to help your students get more motivated, or resources that you want to use with your students. So do not hesitate to visit lite.westcliff.edu for more information. Remember that the LITE Center is here for you to help you develop professionally. Now, let's have a look at the agenda for today's webinar. We're going to start talking about what actually engaging students is all about, and why should we care about students being engaged in our classes. Also, we will discuss what synchronous and asynchronous teaching and learning is, and the advantages and disadvantages. And then finally, I'm going to share with you 10 basic ideas for improving your students' engagement in your online courses. I know that we are going through very difficult, challenging times in which some of you have been teaching on ground for a long time, and now you have been asked to join the online team, the online teaching staff. So this is the perfect moment to try different strategies and different techniques, and of course to follow these 10 basic ideas that you might know. I'm very sure you know, but it's a good way to freshen up your knowledge and remember a few things that you need to keep in mind to keep your students engaged. So first of all, why care about engaging students at all? Well, let's start by putting an old misunderstanding to rest. Engagement is not a synonym for entertainment. It's not at all. To care deeply about whether students are actively involved in class and interested in the content does not mean that you advocate coddling students or treating the college classroom as a free-for-all fun zone. In fact, anyone who conflates engagement and entertainment is not only mistaken, but also quite in conflict with the psychology and neuroscience underlying how human beings learn, which demonstrate that learning requires the motivated application of attention and working memory. Engagement is a necessary first step for learning. We all know that, which is one reason why efforts to enliven your classroom cannot be dismissed as empty entertainment. It goes beyond having fun. But beyond that, deep engagement is a course actually that requires lots of work. So engagement means setting up challenges for students that are meaningful beyond getting a grade. It means those challenges, they encourage risk without punishing failure, or so they may experience the pleasure of resiliency and be really excited about trying again. It is less work for students if they remain unengaged. Of course, they sit passively in the classroom, not really observing material and only just attempting to study, but they are not really engaged in what we are doing. Engaging students, of course, requires using a variety of methods to attract their interest and excitement. And it doesn't mean that you're taking actually the work on learning for them. They need to do the learning. They need to take responsibility for the learning. So the way I see engaging students is kind of an invitation to take initiative, to apply efforts, to risk the daunting possibility of failure. To see this, or it's an upper hand. The students need to see this engaging and learning opportunity as an open hand. In other words, it's about good teaching. A good teacher, a good instructor always makes sure that his or her students are really engaged. Now, as you are going to be teaching online now, from now on, you need to know the difference between synchronous and asynchronous teaching. And the advantages and disadvantages of each one of them. Because the reality is that both have they give wonderful opportunities to students, but they also have their, as everything in life, pros and cons. So there are two options for instructors to facilitate class online. So we have synchronous and asynchronous. When we talk about synchronous, well, instructors and students gather at the same time and interact in real time with a very short or near real-time exchange between the two of them. When we talk about asynchronous learning and teaching, instructors prepare course materials for students in advance of students' access. So then the learners may access the course materials at any time they want, whatever they need it, and they will interact with each other over longer period of time. We actually, when we talk about the online learning at Westcott University, we use asynchronous learning and teaching. Why? Because we do have VCS, virtual class sessions, and they're synchronous, right? But then most of the activities are done, in an asynchronous way. For example, discussion questions, assignments, questions and answers, the questions that students may have that you can answer via email. Those conversations and those learning opportunities are done asynchronous. But now, like structures may choose to engage their students synchronously or asynchronously, depending on the course content or the material that needs to be taught. But of course, there are many advantages and disadvantages to these two types of teaching modalities, if you like. Let's start with the advantages of synchronous teaching. Well, first of all, you have immediate personal engagement between you and your students, which may create greater feelings of community and lessen feelings of isolation. Also, another advantage of synchronous learning and teaching is, well, there are more responsive exchanges between students and instructors, which may prevent miscommunication and misunderstanding. Now, what are the disadvantages of synchronous teaching? Well, first, it's more challenging to schedule shared times for all students and instructors. And some students may face technical challenges or difficulties. For example, if they don't have such a powerful Wi-Fi network connection, then that might create a problem for synchronous learning. Now, let's discuss what asynchronous teaching and learning. Well, we already discussed the concept, but now I want us to think about the advantages and disadvantages. When we talk about advantages, well, there are higher levels or temporal flexibility, which may simultaneously make the learning experience more accessible to different students and also make an archive of past materials accessible. It also the advantages increase cognitive engagement, since students will have more time to engage with and explore the course material. Of course, we have, for example, in synchronous learning, you have only 1-2 hours of VCS, 2 hours, and maybe 1 hour to interact with classmates, not bad. Whereas in asynchronous learning and teaching, you can interact as much as you want. You can use the materials as much as you want. Now, but it does have the disadvantages. When it comes to the disadvantages for asynchronous teaching, students may feel less personally exchanged and less satisfied without the social interaction between their peers and instructors. And well, there's also another disadvantage, and that is that course materials may be misunderstood or have the potential to be, yeah, not to be understood completely without real-time interaction. That's why the best thing to do is to have them both, as we do at Buscliff. Moments in which we get together almost face to face during virtual class sessions. In that moment, as we use the flipped classroom approach at that moment, what we do is that we answer doubts with, from materials that they read weekly. We help them think critically, but basically most of the job, most of the learning and teaching takes place asynchronous, in an asynchronous way. Now, let's start with the ideas to engage your students online. I'm going to share with you 10 of them. They're quite basic, but I do believe that it's something that we need to discuss. It's something that we need to think about again in order to make sure that our classes are engaging. And there's lots of interaction, and students actually feel heard. They feel that their voice matter, and they feel like they're actually learning and they're actually able to apply what they're learning in their courses in the real world. First of all, the first advice that I'm going to give you is gather meaningful information before each session. You can send a quick email or a 1-3 question survey a day or two before class, asking students about their experience or opinions relevant to the session topic. For example, I don't know, what 3 changes do you think would most improve public education? That's a question that you can ask them a few days before the class so as to collect information in advance. And this will help you prepare a prepped questions and materials for students. You can see whether they really know a little bit about the topic or whether you have to really go in depth concerning that. It will also show students that you are interested in what they have to say, which helps per discussion in the synchronous environment. So these questions are done in an asynchronous way. Of course, you send an email, they answer when they can, but then when you get together, they know that you wanted to hear from them. They already know that, first of all, what the topic will be about, so they can get prepared, but also they know that their voice matters. One very, very important thing is that everyone needs to have their camera on. That's the way you can actually monitor whether students are engaged or not, if they're actually on task in your session. So for that, you have to ask participants to keep their cameras on, of course. You have to be strict and you have to be straightforward concerning that. Because students don't always like to have their webcams on, especially if they are participating from home in their pajamas. But it's important that they show their faces. And it's important that they see that they see yours, because it creates a sense of connection and accountability that can help to overcome the disconnectedness that virtual meetings so easily engender. So sometimes you feel like teaching online or learning online is isolated. You feel isolated, but it's not true. It's up to the teacher, it's up to the instructor to be present and to make sure that everyone is actually engaged and involved in the whole process. Of course, there will be moments, it has happened to me when I'm teaching students from Asia or from South America, there are moments in which connectivity is an issue. And then I have to ask them to turn off the camera for a better connection. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the first premise would be, please, everyone, cameras on. Another advice that I wanted to share with you today is to set expectations. Students need to know exactly what is it that they need to do, what is it that they're expected to accomplish. So my advice would be to email students before each VCS and tell them what topics or questions the session will cover, how they should prepare, and what they will be expected to do. You have to be as concrete, as specific as possible. So like, please come prepared to do this, or to briefly describe your research problem and things like that, something very specific. Because when students have the time to prepare, they're often more invested in the discussion and willing to participate. And you will feel, of course, better about calling on them because you already know that they should know. So what I do is that I actually post a picture with the questions that I want them to do on Gap. I also, what actually has worked a lot for me is that if I have any group discussions in my lessons, I create a poster for that and I post it, upload it on Gap. So they know exactly what even the group discussions will be about. So they come prepared and they already come with questions and ideas and opinions about the topic discussed. Well, I cannot emphasize enough that you have to make the content, everything relevant, everything. You have to make your session, online session, relevant. And not only make it relevant, but you have to emphasize the relevance of the session, of the topic, of the content you are discussing. Sometimes we instructors have all too many claims on our time, and we make constant calculations about where to put our efforts and attention. So the same is what students do. So thus, as teachers, it's always worth asking ourselves, okay, why should students care about this topic, and how is it going to help them answer questions or solve problems that matter to them? So that's the way we have to, those are the questions that we have to ask ourselves so as to make our sessions relevant. So by highlighting the answers to those questions with a brief description of the class session, perhaps on Gap or in a reminder email, we are able to design a session to spark students' curiosity. For example, what are the characteristics of the most on these effective teams you've been part of, and what specific things can you do to make the teams you lead function well, for example? That's a question that you can ask your students. And we'll discuss these questions in this week's BCS. So again, you make it relevant, you emphasize the relevance, and you give it to them beforehand so they have enough time to think, reflect, and critically respond to those questions. A really good recommendation that I can give you is to use burning questions. It has always worked wonders in my lessons. So you have to ask participants to come with one controversial question about the topic at hand. Maybe something that frustrates them or confuses them, or that they want a chance to ask you or their classmates. If you are listening to me carefully, I'm not asking you to come up with the questions. You should ask your students to come up with the pertinent questions themselves and bring them to the classroom. So you can start your BCS by giving some or all of your students the opportunity to ask their questions. It all depends on how many students you have. At the College of Education, we have small groups, so we can totally ask all students to ask their burning questions, and that's a wonderful way to spark curiosity, to engage students in the conversation, because it's actually a topic they brought up. It's actually something that they're interested in, and normally they're really, really interesting, thoughtful questions. So we can use them in our classroom. The next recommendation would be to be innovative, to innovate when it comes to content, to insights and activities or tasks that we include in our BCS. So you have to make sure that your synchronous sessions, your BCS, offers novel content, insights, activities, and one big advice that I would uh, share with you is to avoid duplicating what is covered elsewhere in the course. What I mean is like if you don't read again what the weekly readings that they have on Gap, or don't watch again the videos that are posted on Gap, or don't discuss the discussion questions during the online session. It makes no sense. They already had time and a place to do so on Gap. So while the VCS should, of course, connect to those elements of the course and build toward common goals, there should always be added benefit to attending the VCS, such that students don't like to miss the class for fear of missing something new, something important. If they know that you're going to be repeating what it's on Gap, then there's no need for them to come just to get the grade, the VCS grade, and that's it. But that's not what we want. We want them to be engaged. And for that, I would recommend to always go through the content, even though you have taught the same course 20 times. Just go through the content. Try to make it meaningful. Try to make it innovative. Revamp the activities if needed, and don't duplicate what it's already on Gap. Some instructors make the huge mistake, I believe, to discuss the discussion questions during the online sessions. It makes, again, no sense. The discussion questions are for Gap. They're actually also to develop writing skills, academic writing skills, and it should be done like that. What you can do is that if you read all the answers your students gave to the discussion questions and you realize there's something that is not really clear, you can bring it up in your class. But that's different. That's something that will add up to the conversation. You're not repeating yourself. Another tip that I want to share with you when it comes to engaging your students in the online session is to do a quick social check-in at the beginning of the class. Instead of leaving an awkward silence when students are arriving, use the time and opportunity to chat. Ask students what's new or interesting in their lives, what their holidays plans are, whatever. Any topic that you think they might be interested in sharing with you. Just in a physical classroom. Some chit chat always helps to break down social barriers while creating the expectations of interaction. You may want to consider preloading a slide that features a current event or a cartoon or a trivia question to spark conversation in the minutes before the class begins. It's very normal that you log in, you are on the Zoom meeting, and students start coming, joining, and then you feel like, okay, what should I do? Should I wait 5 minutes? And in those 5 minutes, what should I do? Should I turn off my camera, turn off my mic till I have at least half of the students? I don't know. The idea is that you use those 2, 3, 4 minutes while everyone is joining the Zoom meeting to have a social chit chat, to have a bit of a conversation with students so they understand that you care about them beyond just teaching new content, if you like. Now, something every instructor is afraid of: silence in their sessions, especially when it comes to online sessions. When things are getting really quiet, you'd start feeling like, okay, am I just speaking to myself, or are they really listening? So I would recommend you to give students actually silent moments for thinking. So pose the question and give your students a moment to write. Regular cold calling is an effective technique for holding students accountable, but it can irritate them and actually have them that they won't feel motivated if it feels like, let me see if you're engaged kind of exercise. An alternative that I would suggest is to have a question a really thought-provoking question, relevant one, and give students a few minutes to write down their thoughts or answers. Again, giving students time to prepare gives you license to call on them without putting anyone on the spot. That's really important. They don't need to feel like, oh, you're spying on them. They just need to feel like, okay, my professor, my instructor is giving me time to process this content, to process this question, and critically, critically think about my answers to this question. Something that I use a lot in my classes are debates or questions that require students to pick a side. That actually works better when you have a bigger audience, or you have more students. When you don't have too many, maybe that's a good idea, even if you have two, but it's more fun and it's more engaging when you have more students. Well, from my experience, when students are asked to state an opinion, they become more invested in discussing it. So I would suggest you to consider asking content relevant questions, or post just a statement that has to do with your content. Ask students to write their opinion in the chat window. Remember that Zoom has a chat that you can actually decide whether you chat with everyone or you do it privately. So you can pair them up and ask them to write their opinions in pairs, or you can just ask them to write their opinions in the chat window, and then ask a few participants to explain or defend their positions. Students will quickly add complexity, for sure, and shades of gray to otherwise simplistic choices. And the discussion will be off to the races, honestly. It's always like that. It's always, if it's a good question, if it's a really provoking and meaningful, relevant question, students are more than happy to pick a side and speak up. Another advice that I want to share with you is to communicate with your students all the time, not only during VCS, but also during the whole week in a synchronous and asynchronous way. So students are going to have a lot of questions while they're learning remotely. So when they're learning online, you might find it beneficial to set up some office hours to help assist students and provide some boundaries in your life as you work from home, as we're doing right now. And I'm telling you this from experience. If you don't set office hours, you can actually be answering emails, replying to emails 24/7. So you do need to find that balance between life and your personal life and your work. So here are a few ways that you can utilize office hours for remote learning or online learning. So first of all, use the email. I would say that that's the simplest way to set up office hours for your students. Also, you can use Zoom. Okay, so you can. I think it's an excellent way to have live office hours if you like. You can simply create a meeting and announce an announcement on a thread on Gap, and have students ask questions during a given window of time. So when the time slot is over, edit the announcement and put closed on Gap. Okay, so you open one kind of the discussion question type of thread that we have on Gap, and then ask them to ask questions for 1 or 2 days, then close the thread, and then I think that's a great way that everyone benefits of using this on Gap, because I think students can see each other's questions, so they don't repeat the same question. That happens if you meet one-on-one, and then you might have the same question over and over again. You can set up virtual office hours to meet with your students using your webcam, share your computer screen, or collaborate using Zoom's whiteboard feature. You can also chat if you feel like, well, I don't have the time to actually set up a meeting and I am not into emails. Well, you can chat. You may not be using a chat right now in your classroom, but it can be a wonderful and useful tool, especially for students' office hours or for students who may be more comfortable asking questions via chat compared to by phone or video calls. For this, we would recommend you to use Google Hangouts. Everyone at Westcliff has a Gmail or a Westcliff account, so use Google use Google Hangouts with your Westcliff University account at certain given hours for students to reach you. Something that I forgot to say when it comes to emails is that you have to use, first of all, your Westcliff University email for every communication you have with students. And make sure that you respond within the 24 hours the email was sent. Because remember, online presence needs to be constant and needs to be obvious so as for students not to feel isolated. Well, those were my tips and tricks when it comes to engaging your students online. Again, those are basic tips that I can share with you. There is a second part to this recorded session that I will share with you very soon. But to summarize what we have been discussing, I think key to engaging your students is make class an inviting, pleasant place to be, a fun place to be, an exciting, meaningful place to be. So for that, ask yourself, do you enjoy going into your online classroom? Do you like being there? So do you look forward to communicating with your online students in the same way you look forward to interacting with students face-to-face or in a physical classroom? I know that those are hard questions, but they shine a light on an important issue for many faculty members. If you're honest, many of us will have to say that we don't enjoy being in our online classes as much as we enjoy teaching in person. But indeed, that could explain why only 9% of us, according to research, prefer to teach online exclusively. Well, I'm one of those 9% and love teaching online because we simply may not enjoy being there as much as in the classroom. So if you struggle to enjoy the online learning environment as the instructor, it's not hard to imagine that this struggle is even harder for students. When you teach in person, you do a lot of things to help students feel welcome. You greet students, you smile, you make eye contact. Well, I invite you to apply the same principle to your online classes. When you teach in person, you do a lot of things to help students feel welcome and comfortable in the classroom. So do the same. Do the same in during the BCS. So they feel like the atmosphere is pleasant and therefore they're more likely to learn and they're more likely to engage in this whole learning process. So everything you do in your face-to-face classroom that works, apply the same principle to your online classes. A deliberate effort to make them more inviting and pleasant is likely to result in a more interesting and engaging class. So thank you so much for watching this recorded presentation. And again, you know that the LITE Center is here for you to help you develop professionally. So if you would like to present a LITE professional development session, you just need to contact us at lite@westcliff.edu. That way, we know exactly what your expertise is, and then we can actually totally set up a webinar or recorded presentation for you. So thank you so much for attending this session and look forward to sharing with you the second part of this recorded presentation. Bye.